Mika Zibanejad wants better communication from the Rangers. Seriously?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1298 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So at long last, we're getting to part 2 of Breakup Day. There were obviously a lot of talking points, a lot of interesting revelations that occurred on that day. We had to take a brief break from discussing them because we had the news in our last episode that Chris Drury was going to be extended as the Ranger general manager. So if you want my thoughts on Drury and the extension, check the episode right before this one. But for today, like I said, some more talking points coming out of Ranger Breakup Day, including some very noteworthy comments from Mika Zibanejad. Also going to be talking about Calvin Haan and his sort of parting shots at the New York Rangers, I think we can call it. A couple other tidbits as well, including Braden Schneider, playing with an injury for the better part of the last few seasons. Going to have some thoughts on that as well. But we begin with Mika Zibanejad. Like I said, some interesting things to say. And we'll get into the quotes and my thoughts on them and all that in just a second. But let me just preface this entire segment with a question for all of you guys first. When is the last time Mika Zibanejad said something to the media before a game, during a game? I guess not really during a game, after a game, during the offseason, that left you feeling better about the New York Rangers and where things stand, and Mika Zibanejad specifically, and where his head is at? When is the last time Mika has spoken and you ended up feeling better about the whole picture of the New York Rangers because of it? For me, it's been a while. It's been a while. And to be fair, not everything he said was like terrible or how could he say that or anything, but there were certainly some eyebrow raisers during Mika Zibanejad's session with the media on Breakup Day. Mika might want to consider going to a PR class during the offseason. That might be a way that he could spend some of his free time. But, one thing that we already talked about, we're not going to get into it in too much detail here, but the idea of Mika Zibanejad potentially being traded, what does the future hold for him? I'll say right now real quick what I've said all along, and then we'll dive into some of these quotes. I don't think that Mika Zibanejad wants to waive his no-move clause. He gave every indication that that is indeed the case, that he doesn't want to go anywhere else. He has a right to use that clause if he so desires. And even if he was willing to move it, I've said this before too, I don't think there's too many teams lining up to take on Mika Zibanejad and his contract. 5 more years at $8.5 million per season. Be a lot easier to move somebody like Chris Kreider, whose name has also, obviously come up in trade talks. But as far as Mika, here's a couple of the things that he had to say. We'll just go one at a time here, and I'll offer my thoughts along the way. He said he was asked if there was any more stress around the team this year, given all the wheelings and dealings that were going on and all the just general chaos. And he said, I don't know if I would say there was some type of stress. Obviously, with Goody being gone and having some of the guys that were with us in the playoff run as well, even though you don't always expect it, but guys like Birdie and Rosie, Rosovic, and then obviously the whole thing with Troob started, there was a lot of talk about that too. And with Mika, some of his quotes just come off as very vague. First of all, let's just backtrack for a second here. When he said Rosie, I have to assume that means Jack Rosovic, right? Who else would that mean? Who, by the way, was obviously just huge in the Ranger run through the playoffs, right? Last season. So he mentioned Rosovic. Birdie. I don't know who Birdie is. I might just be drawing a little bit of a blank here. Maybe it's more obvious than I realize. I don't know who he's talking about when he says Birdie. Who on the Rangers last season had the nickname Birdie? Birdie. Yeah, I don't know. You guys let me know in the comment section. Maybe it's obvious and I'm just not coming up with it, but I can't figure that out. Look, I get it. It's okay to be upset if your team, your GM trades a player on your team that you like, that you respect, who you consider to be a leader, who you consider to be instrumental in the team's success, whether we're talking Goodrow, who was waived, Trouba, who was traded, or anybody else. Okay, you can be upset about it, but you got to get over it. You got to move on with your life. You got to keep going. You're getting paid a lot of money to play hockey. I feel like I'm stating the obvious here, but maybe it's not so obvious to some of these Ranger players. Again, if you're mad that they traded Jacob Trouba, go hit the punching bag for a little while. Do what you got to do, scream into a pillow, get it out of your system, and then it's time to push on and move forward. I understand these guys are human, and it probably sucks to have a player that you care about traded away and somebody that you think is important to your team's success traded away. But those aren't your decisions to make. Those come from the front office. Those come from Chris Drury, and we could talk about Drury, and we talked about him in the last episode, and I think he's had a shaky last year or so, but that's his job. He's got to make the tough decisions. The players don't really get a say in it. Mika went on to say, and at the end of the day, we don't get up to the level of play that we should with this team. And then obviously there's a bit of a turnover midseason as well. A lot of moving parts, moving pieces. And then he went on to say this. And if you look at the months, we were 3-10 in December, so we kind of kill ourselves there. And then we're chasing. We get out of that month 500. You never know. But it's easy to kind of look back and be like, oh, if we won that game, we would have been in. Or if they would have lost that game or whatever. Overall, I just don't think we got up to the level of play that we can and we've shown. Now, this one, he's not really wrong about anything that he says here, but to me, it just speaks to something that we've talked about before. The mindset of these players, the collective mindset of these players just seems to be off. It doesn't seem to be in the right place. Now he's talking about like hypothetical situations about if we won this one game or if that team had lost that one game, that they would have at least gotten into the playoffs. Was that the goal this season, to just make the playoffs? I mean, I don't know. In year one of Gerard Gallant, I think that's a pretty good goal going into the season, to just make the playoffs. I can accept that. And then obviously they did a lot more than that. But you're coming off of a season where you had the best record in the NHL. You made it to the conference final. You were 2 wins away from going to the Stanley Cup final. I mean, really think about that. You were that close to being one of the last 2 teams standing, and who knows what could have happened at that point. But now he's talking about, just making the playoffs. And okay. I guess if you get in, anything can happen. But let's say that did happen. Let's say the Rangers eked out another couple of wins at the end there, and maybe Montreal slumped, and the Rangers got in. They got Montreal's spot. They're now up against the Caps. Does anybody really think, based on what we saw this season, that it would be going very well? And I feel like there was always just this kind of sense, I don't want to call it entitlement, but maybe just like this assumption among Ranger players this year. They just thought they were going to get into the playoffs. And this quote kind of backs up that theory. I can't say that for sure. But again, the Ranger goal, it should have never been to just make the playoffs this upcoming season. That was like a worst case scenario, that they'd be one of the last couple of teams in, or so we thought. Then obviously they didn't make the playoffs at all. But yeah, I couldn't, I don't know. I just didn't like that quote. I guess that's the best way I can put it. Then he talked about how there needs to be more communication. And I rolled my eyes at a lot of Ranger quotes this season. This one might take the cake, though. He said, I think there was frustration. I think it's just when you don't know everything, we don't know what's going on. And he talked about it in greater detail than that. But again, dude, like, this is how pro sports work. The general manager of the Rangers or of this team or of that team in any of the pro sports, they don't owe you an explanation for every little thing that they do. They don't owe you an explanation when they trade this guy. They don't owe you an explanation when they waive that guy, or when this guy gets called up or that guy gets sent down. The coaches, coaches, it's good to have some communication with the players to let them know the idea behind why this guy's up in the lineup and why this guy's down and why this guy's a healthy scratch. That's all well and good. It's good for coaches to communicate with the players well. And Laviolette, for all his fault, it does sound like did that this season. But even there, your job is to play hockey, man. Those decisions don't belong to you. If the coach wants your input, I'm sure he'll ask for it. And the front office, they don't check in with players when it comes to making moves. Maybe once in a while, like if somebody's going to go out and trade for this guy or trade for that guy, and this player that we already have, he played with him in college or something, then by all means, you can call up that guy and find out about the player that you're looking to acquire, but they don't owe you a thing. They don't owe you a thing. Brian Boyle talked about this the other day on his podcast. He does the podcast with, Brooks and Molly Walker, and he's talking about how, this is the softest bunch of players ever. That's pretty much what he said. And he talked about how I never knew what Glenn Sather was doing. My job was to go out there and play hockey. And he's right. I'm sorry, man. I know there's a human element to all this. And I know it's rough when you see, your leader, your captain, Jacob Trouba, traded away. But things have to be done. Difficult decisions need to be made. And you're not in the front office, Mika. Now, when you hang up your skates, you retire. If you want to seek that line of work, by all means. And maybe then you can have more communication with the players if you'd like to. But that's not your place right now, not while you're an active player. I'll leave you with a quote that I actually kind of, I was going to say I liked it. It was less annoying than most of his other quotes. I think it was a little bit positive. I'll let you guys be the judge for yourselves here. But this is what Mika had to say. Again, we like to be glass half full on here. So we're going to leave you with a somewhat positive quote here. He's talking about the season, just everything that happened. This is what he said. Everyone wants the same thing. Everyone wants to be here in June and talk to you guys and have a smile on their face. And you guys ask us how it was on the parade and how it was to win and what it means. That's all we want. But we're not there right now. And we're not going to get there if we don't take ownership. For me, my whole season, but also a lot of things that we have to do together. So this is good. This is mostly a good quote. Just the fact that, hey, you have to have goals, right? You're not going to accomplish more than you set out to accomplish. And so it's good that Mika still thinks about the idea of winning a Stanley Cup here in New York with the Rangers. As laughable as that concept became by somewhere around November or December this last season, the goal has to be there. The goal has to be there, and it's good that he still thinks about that kind of stuff. What else did he say here? Talking about how that's all we want and everyone wants the same thing. He did take ownership of his own season too. For me, my whole season, he said that. I think a big, kind of point of contention that a lot of us have with the Rangers and specifically the leaders is you just don't hear enough of that. You don't hear enough, that's on me. I have to be better. I have to do things better. So it was good to hear that from Mika in this situation. Look, I have no doubt that Mika Zibanejad would like to win a Stanley Cup. I think if you're in the NHL, certainly that's one of the goals. But I think, when you watch how this last season went and you saw, the quotes that he gave after some of these games and just how blah these performances were by the Rangers, I think it's fair to wonder, is he the guy that's going to drive the bus there, to a Stanley Cup? I just don't really see a whole lot from his demeanor, from the things that he says, from his play on the ice that would suggest that that's the case. And one other thing that I'll mention here before we shift our attention to Calvin Haan and a couple of other things as well is this is an idea that we have for the offseason. We might even do this in the next week, depending on how much news there is from the Rangers. But I've thrown out the idea of next season, new coach, strip every alternate captain of their letter and just go into training camp and even into the preseason. Nobody's wearing any letters. These guys, whether it's the incumbent alternate captains or whether it's some up and coming hungry players, everybody has a chance to earn the captaincy. Everybody has a chance to earn the alternate captaincy. But you just let it play out. You let these guys establish themselves, and the new coach makes those decisions. So we'll get into that in greater detail in a future episode. But I am not opposed to that idea in the slightest. So going to keep everything rolling just a second. Shift our attention to Calvin Haan's parting shots at the New York Rangers. And we're going to do that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to an NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it is next level. And thanks to Gametime, getting in the door is easier and way more affordable than ever. Gametime is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer, and with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. Their all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with none of those annoying surprise fees at checkout. Plus, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers as always. Thank you guys so much for supporting this show throughout the season, throughout the offseason as well. For the next episode, it might be something that we just talked about. Now, granted, between now and the next episode, there might be a million more things that happen with the Rangers in terms of breaking news and whatnot. So we might have to adjust on the fly. But yeah, that might be the next episode. The thing I just mentioned a second ago, where we talk about this concept of stripping all the alternate captains of their letters. And like I said, making everybody earn it next season, making everybody earn the captaincy, the alternate captaincy, and every minute that they get on the ice. Crazy concept, right? Earning what you get. But for right now, let's shift our attention to New York Ranger legend Calvin DeHaan. And he obviously made some waves not too long ago. So down the home stretch of the season, he was the latest Ranger to complain about playing time. And in his case, not just ice time, but obviously being out of the lineup altogether. And for a quick recap, DeHaan was, of course, part of the trade that sent Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey to the Colorado Avalanche. DeHaan played in 3 straight games with the Rangers. He was a +4 in that time. He had an assist. He was not on the ice for a goal against. And in those 3 games combined, the Rangers only allowed 1 goal during regulation. The Caps scored 2 goals, it was, now I'm trying to remember. Was it 2 goals in regulation and then the Caps won 3-2 in overtime? I think that's what it was. It was back-to-back shutouts against the Islanders and the Predators. But the bottom line, Rangers weren't giving up many goals, and Calvin DeHaan was not on the ice for any of the goals that the Rangers allowed in those 3 games. And after that, DeHaan was a healthy scratch for the rest of the entire season, and he was not happy about it. He voiced his opinion to beat reporters, just kind of in passing, going by them. He wanted to address it further. Rangers PR convinced him to wait until after the season was over. He also released a very diplomatic statement on Twitter where he basically just said, hey, I'm just frustrated. I just want to play. It's tough. I'm competitive. I don't want to be watching from the press box from this many games in a row. So that kind of leads us into breakup day for Calvin DeHaan. And he had a couple of quotes. He was asked to assess his play with the Rangers, and he says, not much to assess. I only played 3 games. And then he went on to say, a little frustrated, obviously, but it is what it is. Moving on, just trying to be in the best shape as possible for training camp, wherever that may be, and just go from there. And I'll wager a guess that it's not going to be with the New York Rangers, but you probably all already figured that out by yourselves. He was asked if he was under the impression that he would get a chance to play with the Rangers. And he said, yeah, of course, it might have just been a teleprompter answer, frankly. Just welcome to the team, that kind of thing. We're excited to have you, and yada, yada, yada. The best quotes always have yada, yada, yada in them. That's just kind of a rule. And then he went on to say, they alluded to the fact that I was part of a trade for a Ranger who was a good New York Ranger for a long time. He's talking about Lindgren, obviously. I was told that I'm going to be part of the team moving forward and get an opportunity, but I'll find out some answers in a bit. That's all I can give you at the moment, unfortunately. Like I said, New York Ranger legend. No, look, in all seriousness, for a guy that was only here for half of a season, and for a guy that only played in a grand total of 3 games with the New York Rangers, I don't think a lot of us are going to forget about Calvin DeHaan. I really, down the home stretch this season, when he kind of, mouthed off to the reporters and talked about, what did he say? He said, how about the way I've been treated here? It's bleeped. And so that obviously created a whole, storm. And then there was a statement on Twitter. And now you get this. And I think a lot of Ranger fans were kind of lobbying for DeHaan. A lot of us really kind of liked what we saw when he was on the ice. That happened to be when I was on my vacation. So I was watching like bits and pieces of the Rangers at that time, caught some highlights as well. Didn't think he'd be a healthy scratch the whole rest of the season. But talking to a lot of you guys, again, I didn't see all those games in their entirety. People were happy with what Calvin DeHaan was bringing to the table and the way that he was playing. And so then to not see him again for the entire rest of the season, that was not a welcome development by the Ranger fan base, especially when you consider the struggles of some of the other Ranger defensemen, and especially when you consider something that we'll get into a little bit later today, the fact that Braden Schneider's shoulder was basically about to fall off. I'm exaggerating to make the point, obviously, but Schneider's been dealing with an injury for quite some time and dealt with it last season and finally got surgery to correct it this offseason. That's one of several things we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But as for DeHaan, I mean, all the best to him wherever he ends up going. In some ways, him calling out the Rangers, calling out the coaching staff, I think it was kind of cathartic for a lot of us. But again, I know I mentioned this just a second ago. Very, very safe assumption to that Calvin DeHaan will be playing elsewhere next season. I don't think he's even going to pick up the phone if Chris Drury calls him. And honestly, at this point, why would Chris Drury call him? So in just a minute, we're going to, like I said, turn our attention to some other things, just some bits and pieces from everything that happened during breakup day, including a revelation that Braden Schneider was dealing with, a fairly serious injury. It required surgery. So we'll talk about all that stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports, College Football 25, to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it is all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take your or your kids' games wherever you can plug in. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode by talking a little bit more about, again, just kind of the odds and ends, the bits and pieces to come out of Rangers Breakup Day. To begin with, some sad news. JT Miller was not at Breakup Day. The reason being one of his close friends had passed away. So obviously we send our condolences to JT Miller and anybody else that might have been affected. JT Miller, the other bit of news about him, this wasn't really from Breakup Day, but apparently this offseason, he is trying to qualify for this year's U.S. Open. So all the best of luck to JT Miller in doing so. I don't really know a ton about golf. I'm not really a golf guy. Maybe at some point I'll get into it, but Frisbee golf, I like that. I find that a lot more fun than traditional golf. But anyway, good luck to JT Miller doing that. Also, kind of a programming note here. We discussed everything involving Chris Kreider in the second most recent episode before this one. So if you missed my thoughts on that, if you want to, get some Kreider news and some assessment of everything that he said regarding his future with the team, it's 2 episodes before this one. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it today. We've got some other things to get to, including Braden Schneider and the fact that he sat out the last 2 games of the season once the Rangers were mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. And now we, of course, know the reason why. Apparently at Breakup Day, and I was not there, but Braden Schneider came in with a giant brace on his right arm. He already has had surgery for a torn labrum and did say that he would be ready to go for next season. And we also had this tweet from Vince Mercogliano. He said, craziest part, Schneider sustained this injury during the 2022-2023 season. Played with it in 2023-24, but the tear got progressively worse this season to the point where surgery was recommended. He wanted to play as long as the team was alive, but said it hindered him physically. And then there was a quote from Braden Schneider himself there that I'll read for you guys. It's probably been 2 years since I had the initial injury. Us and the training staff did a really good job at communicating and making sure I was able to go, and I wanted to go. We had a big run last season, and I wanted to be here for this year just because I knew we had a good team. Obviously, it didn't go the way we wanted it to. And this goes back to a lot of the things that we said about Chris Kreider when we found out about the entire laundry list of injuries that he had. We knew he had the bad back, but then also his hand/wrist, his vertigo, all this stuff. Whether we're talking about Kreider, Schneider, or anybody else that plays in a situation like this, I do think sometimes the team needs to step in and save these guys from themselves, because we know hockey players are a special breed. They'll go out there, they'll gut it out, they'll play through just about anything. If they can walk, if they can skate, they're going to go out there. And with Schneider, I don't think that his play was compromised nearly as much as Kreider's seemingly was this past season. So I guess it's not as big of a deal. And again, well-established fact on this podcast, I'm not a doctor, but I don't know. At a certain point, you got to step in there for these guys. And Schneider did mention that his physicality was down. I think going by the eye test, it felt that way. It didn't seem like there were as many Schneider hits, and certainly not as many of those like really big hits that he's become known for his first handful of seasons in the league. I mean, you don't get a nickname like Baby Truba for nothing, right? As far as like the hit totals, they weren't down dramatically. It was 167 hits last year for Schneider, 146 this year. But yeah, I mean, just going by the eye test, it didn't feel like he was as much of a physical presence this year as other seasons. And obviously he didn't feel that way either. But he said he could play through it, that it limited his physicality, and also said, I want no excuses going into next season. And look, that's another thing here, too, that we can talk about. If you want a silver lining of the Rangers missing the playoffs, I know a lot of people are going to say they didn't deserve to make the playoffs, and I would agree with that. But I still was rooting for them to get there just because it's the playoffs. They're fun. Whether the Rangers are the top dog in the playoffs or they barely eke their way in there, I enjoy watching Ranger playoff hockey. I always have and I always will. But if you want a silver lining, if you've got like the playoff blues right now, watching all these other teams play and not the Rangers, look, the guys that are banged up, Schneider, Kreider, if he's going to be back next season, and we'll see how that goes. Anybody else that's been banged up and beaten down from some of these deep playoff runs the Rangers have had, this is the longest offseason that the Rangers have had in a long time. So for a guy like Schneider and some other guys too, whether they're injured or just otherwise banged up, they've got more time than they've had in a long time to get rested up, ready to rock and roll next season. Hopefully they're taking advantage of that in every way that they can, whether that's rehab, working out, whatever it might be. So we'll keep everything moving here to another bit of news, another bit of injury news. In fact, Adam Edstrom, he did not get into the specifics of his lower body injury, but he did apparently have surgery for it. He said also that he may have been an option for the Rangers had they gotten into the playoffs and gone on a little bit of a run. So that's interesting to know. And that being the case, you can kind of infer that he'll be ready to go for training camp next season. And he said the same thing. There's a quote that he had to say regarding his line mates. Obviously, he was out there with Rempe and Carrick for a big chunk of the season. I felt like we really got going there at the end. Me, Matt Rempe, and Sam Carrick, we found something really good. It's always tough to miss time, but it's one of those things that happens. It's part of the sport, but I'm excited to come back strong. I love both of those guys. It was a blast playing with them. And yeah, I really like that fourth line. All three of those guys, there were nights it was not uncommon for that to be the best Ranger line on the ice. They contributed offensively every now and then for sure. They also set a big time physical tone together. Felt like they'd be out there spending the entirety of their shifts in the offensive zone. So if nothing else, you can go in there and go to work together and obviously wear down the opposition a little bit. But yeah, I loved watching this trio. And it's unfortunate for Edstrom because I feel like this is the second straight season, and he's only played in 2 seasons, this year and last year. But he's kind of the forgotten man at the end of the season because 2 years ago, I mean, I really don't know what to call it. So the season that just ended, we'll still call that this season. And when we say last year, it refers to the season before that. We'll go with that. So last season, Edstrom got called up. Rempe got called up not too long after that. And then Rempe kind of overshadowed him a little bit. Edstrom got hurt there too and was kind of the forgotten man. And same thing this year. He was doing well, having a strong campaign for himself. He was one of the standouts during, Ranger training camp and everything, and obviously made the team and did some good things. But again, he gets hurt and everybody kind of forgets about him. I mean, with all the drama surrounding this team, it would be hard not to forget about him in some ways. But let's not forget about Matt Edstrom. Yeah, Adam Edstrom. He had a heck of a season. He was playing very well for the Rangers, and I'm looking forward to what he can do when he's healthy next year. Then also you had some players commenting on just the overall state of the team. This is an Igor quote that kind of caught everybody's attention. Igor Shesterkin. In my mind, something broke during the season and went the other way. We couldn't handle it. It's a pretty damning quote, but also not an inaccurate one. Yeah, this team, it started to go south, and they just couldn't stop it. But then, whatever amount of sympathy you would feel for them, it goes right out the window when you look at some of those games that they were playing in November and especially December, and you realize they didn't try to stop it. There were so many no-shows. There were so many games where they just did not compete. It's hard to really feel any sympathy. They did it to themselves. You have just no show after no show after bad effort. This is habit-forming stuff, and you see the result. They just plummeted down the standings. There was a time there where they got back into it a little bit, that 7-0-3 stretch. But I don't know. Something still just fell off, and you just weren't sure that they would be able to sustain it. And lo and behold, again, they collapsed down the stretch again. So not good. Adam Fox also had some thoughts on, the whole situation. This year was unrecognizable. It certainly feels different, and we're all asking why. It was obviously guys that were, he's talking now about guys that were, moved on from, shown the door, essentially. It was obviously guys that were really well liked. I think more so was even Trubes admitting it was hard for him to kind of lead this team in that situation. Maybe a lot of it is subconscious too. You don't really think about it, but I guess when your captain has that thought and feels that way, that's a guy that has changed games for us in terms of the energy he's brought and being able to change it with a hit or a fight. Sometimes that could affect a team. Again, I get it. I get that they're not human. I get they're not hockey playing robots. I get there's emotions. I get that you form a bond with your teammates, right? That you don't want to see them traded. But these things happen. It's pro sports. I don't really have anything I can say to make Adam Fox feel any better. I mean, players get traded. It's part of professional sports. Unless everybody just gets a full no move clause going forward. And I can just sense the second I said that, everybody's freaking out right now. Because right now, the Rangers probably give those out a little too freely as it is. Guys get traded. Guys get waived. Guys move on. Guys leave in free agency. It happens. I don't know what else to say about it. A couple other tidbits here. Matt Rempe has moved out of the Jonathan Quick household and his family. Rempe is planning to get his own place, likely in the city next season. Quick did chime in, though, that Rempe is still invited over for dinner, so that's obviously very cool. Gabe Perreault is going back to Boston College. Obviously, he can't play hockey there, but he's going to finish out his semester, so that's pretty cool. Good for him. And Brett Berard mentioned that he's planning to join the summer training group that includes Kreider, Rempe, and Quick. And he's also going to work, or I guess that whole group is going to work with local strength and conditioning coach Ben Prentice. I actually interviewed Ben Prentice. That we're going back like probably close to 10 years, maybe 10 years. He basically works with a ton of like very notable professional athletes, and we did a story on him when we were covering some local sports in his gym. Max Pacioretty was there that day, so I got to interview him. Marty St. Louis was there too, but he was right in the middle of his workout, so it wasn't going to bother him. But yeah, that guy's no joke. He whips these guys into shape. I was in there for not really that long, but he definitely puts them through the ringer. So knowing that Berard is going to work out there, Kreider, Rempe, Quick, that's obviously good to hear, and I'm sure he'll do what he needs to do to get these guys ready to go. But yep, I feel like we can call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, that is @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.